Hello, I'm Neil Sanderson. I'm a volunteer at the Ashmolean Museum. Doors are in some ways a very simple and functional object, but in other ways they're full of symbolism, full of culture, art, memories, emotion. We speak of opening doors to new ideas, new people, new events, new lives, and we shut doors on bad weather, the outside world, or things from the past that we want to be rid of. These particular doors are on the second floor of the Ashmolean Museum. They date from around 1600. The floral design is typical of the Western Indian Ocean area at that time. They were carved most likely in India, where the wood is from, or possibly in Eastern Africa. And in 1921, they were the doors to a merchant's house in Jeddah. And it's clear what message these were intended to convey for the merchant. The solidity and strength and standing of his business, his taste and affluence, the range of his networks and contacts, given the design showing his contacts outside the Islamic world particularly. And in 1921, they were bought by an Englishman, Thomas Edward Lawrence, or T.E. Lawrence as he's usually known, who had them shipped back to his cottage in Dorset and used them for the rest of his life as the doors to his swimming pool, a typical ironic, sarcastic approach for him. Lawrence was a British intelligence officer in the Middle East during World War I. He'd worked with Arab forces to carry out guerrilla attacks on the Ottoman Empire's occupying soldiers. Famously, he'd adopted Arab dress and styles and encouraged hopes of Arab independence. And you can see his robes also in the Ashmolean here on the left. And for me, the doors symbolise the things that Lawrence tried to put in his past after his wartime experiences, some more successfully than others. Lawrence became a diplomat and an advisor to Winston Churchill immediately after the First World War. He was aware, and he sometimes felt guilty, that he had stoked Arab desire for independence from British rule in the Middle East. The 1921 Cairo press conference, where Lawrence played a role, ended with the effective division of the Middle East between France and Britain, with the Arab leaders being assigned roles under Western control. Lawrence seems to have resigned himself to this, maybe being naive, or maybe he was just accepting the reality of imperial politics. He appears never to have gone back to the Middle East, and he certainly ended his attempt over many years to influence the politics and the shape of the Middle East. So in that respect, he did close the door on his whole involvement in that way. But maybe his life afterwards was also shaped by his belief that this was a betrayal of Arab hopes which he had colluded in. Certainly, he never really closed the door on his celebrity status in Britain. His image as a dynamic Western man adopting Arab dress and galvanizing Arab revolt really started with the publishing of articles and photos about Lawrence by the American journalist Lowell Thomas. Then in 1919, Thomas ran a series of dramatic shows at the Royal Albert Hall featuring Lawrence's story alongside dancing girls, imagery, and elements of what was seen as Arab culture. 1 million people saw the shows, which elevated Lawrence to superstar celebrity status. And although he claimed to loathe his fame, he apparently attended himself 6 or 7 times. And after this, Lawrence never seems to have been able to either turn his back on his celebrity status or enjoy it and continue in it. Lowell Thomas himself said that Lawrence had a talent for backing into the limelight. He was always claiming to play down his image, but then was unable to stop maintaining it by briefings to the press, authorising biographies, and briefing his friends. Lawrence very publicly enlisted in the Air Force, the Army, and then again the Air Force, always in the lowest ranks, seemingly a way of maximising his image as Lawrence of Arabia by the contrast with his wartime service as an officer. But this was only popular by using his extensive contacts in the establishment, most notably Lord Trenchard, head of the Air Force, Leo Amery, the First Lord of the Admiralty, and his connections with Lloyd George to be accepted in the first place and to get the roles, the postings, and the situations he wanted. And he was known throughout in the services for insubordination and being very separate from everyone else. His low status was especially in contrast to the reality that he was heir to huge estates in Ireland. Lawrence had a wide network among the major writers of the day, from E.M. Forster to Edward Garnett, Thomas Hardy and Robert Graves. But his aim to be a man of letters himself mainly centred on regular releases and editions of Seven Pillars of Wisdom about his wartime experience, again maintaining his popular image whenever it started to fade. He said he hated the beastly book and wished it had never been written, but continued to issue versions of it to maintain his story. Lawrence, we would now say, had many of the symptoms of PTSD, as so many of the generation who served in the First World War. His multiple attempts at suicide, his lying, his complete fabrications of whole lifestyles and people, his bouts of depression, melancholy and elation, all seem to point to clear post-traumatic stress. It's been argued that actually Lawrence, as a military leader with one foot in the British Army and one in Arab culture, but accepted by neither, was always likely to be especially affected by this. So Lawrence appears to have been happiest, and in some ways to have been able to shut out the difficulties he faced most effectively at Clouds Hill, his cottage in Dorset, which was very simple, and he lived as carefree a life as was possible. Friends talked of listening to Beethoven music, eating food directly from tins, and sleeping in sleeping bags. And maybe for Lawrence, this was his answer to the challenge of so many of his generation, that when the most thrilling and exciting and challenging time of your life happens very early on, what do you do next? He probably found his moment in the Middle East at that time, and nothing else was ever going to live up to that experience, for good and bad. And equally, what do you do when you have been spared and many of your friends had not, as that generation also had to deal with? So in happier times, when we're able to go to the Ashmolean and see these doors, maybe we can think of them as a magnificent piece of craft work which shows how styles and goods moved around the world. A symbol of Lawrence after his wartime involvement in Africa and the struggles he had in moving on, and also an object which asks the question for all of us as we close the door on some of the events recently: what new doors are we going to open to new ideas, new friends, new activities, and new lives?